So, as Professor Lanoux said, my name is Jason McCarron. My project is Do Ethics Matter in Leadership? For some reason, the D and my R are cut off. But before I get started, I wanted to thank Carrie. Carrie's my Interdisciplinary Studies Advisor. Carrie, without you, there's no way I'd be here today. So thank you very much for helping me along the way. I'd also like to thank Professor Rich Wilson of the Philosophy Department. Couldn't make it today, he's in class, but he's been a huge help as well. And Nick Lennon actually used to work here, works at GMU now, George Mason. So he was unable to make it, but without both of them, I wouldn't be here. They made huge contributions. I'd also like to thank my fiance Leanne for supporting me through it all, and my dad Mike is back there as well, so thank you too. So to begin, how many of you have ever been involved in an organization? I can say most of us in here are involved in the same organization, UMBC. And our organization, just like every other one, has a leader. Our leader, Dr. Hrabowski, I personally think is pretty great. I think most people would agree with me, but I haven't researched him, so I can't say for sure. But for me, I really became interested in leadership growing up through soccer. Played my entire life, played here at UMBC as well, but in soccer I had some great leaders, other coaches, other players as team captains on the team. I myself, I was a team captain on most teams. And I really wanted to figure out why people voted for me to be a team captain year in and year out. What was different about me? What kind of set me apart that they wanted me to be their leader? And that brought me to my research question. I'm sorry. Here we go. Is it prudent for a leader to act in an ethical manner in order to create and sustain a strong leader-follower relationship over time? So I didn't just want to focus on the leader. I also wanted to focus on the followers and the relationship that they had together. And pardon me, sorry, let me get you to my math real quick. I'm not sure why. There we go. So in order to do this project, I started out with a literature review. This is the concept map that was created for my literature review. This really encompasses most of the project. As well as the literature review, I did case studies, but we'll get to the case studies later. In my literature review, sorry, it seems to not be working. Let me pull that up and we'll just get going and we'll leave that as it is. In my literature review, I started off with 5 different concepts. They were leadership, motivation, behavior, situation, and ethics. Leadership and ethics, obviously quite important to this, as it's in the title, it's in the question. We really need to understand leaders, the job that they do, and ethics. Motivation is also important because we need to understand what motivates the leader to take this challenge, what motivates the follower to follow the leader, and what about the leader, what does he do to motivate his followers. Behavior, I wanted to understand the behavior of the leaders and of the followers. How do they interact? What about them helps them to reach the goal that they've set? Situation, it would not be very easy for any leader to fall into any leadership or any situation, and do a good job. So it was important to match the right leader with the right situation. See if we can get this moving. If not, we'll just move on. Oh, sorry, this doesn't seem to be working, but we branched out from our...
The arrows at the bottom.
There we go. Thank you. We branched out from our 5 different concepts. In the purple, we have 3 different disciplines in one professional field. Our disciplines are philosophy, psychology, and sociology, our professional field of management. Those four areas really helped inform this question, and it really helped me to understand what I was getting into. To delve into them each, in philosophy, it was important to define ethics. We really need to understand what ethics was. We also need to understand leadership, both of them from the theoretical perspective. Philosophy was also used in the case studies of our 3 leaders that, again, we'll delve into later, and it was used to understand the leader-follower relationship. Next, we look into psychology. Psychology, the most important thing to understand was the personality of the leader, the one in charge. What made him tick or her tick? What made them work? What really made them effective? But again, psychology is important in the leader-follower relationship and our case studies. Management, the first thing I really needed to do was define the difference between a leader and a manager. They're not synonymous, they're very similar, but a leader has more long-term goals. They really look towards what do we want to accomplish as an organization, whereas the manager will take a piece of the organization, set goals to help that piece reach the overall organizational goals. That's where goal setting came in. How do we set goals? What about goals helps us to attain them? We also looked at 3 leadership theories: transactional leadership, transformational leadership, and charismatic leadership, and helped to understand how those theories really put the practice or the theory of leadership into place. And again, management was used in our case study of the leaders and the leader-follower relationship. The last discipline we looked at was sociology. Psychology really looked at the leader. Sociology really looked at the organization or the group and how the leader affected them and how they reacted. Group consensus was also important because the group, if one person in the group has a problem and they don't speak up because the group is going along with it, that's going to affect the relationship between the leader and follower. So again, sociology was used for the leader-follower relationship and in our case studies. Now, so far we've seen that each discipline has looked at leadership and has looked at ethics on their own. But in order to make this interdisciplinary project, we need to combine all the leaderships, make them integrate in a way that really helped us understand the question instead of just them by themselves, because they've tried and haven't done, in my opinion, a good enough job to really satisfy the question. The first integration strategy we used is an overarching concept. I mentioned many times the leader-follower relationship, and that was seen as important in every discipline that we looked at, in psychology, sociology, and philosophy, and then the professional field of management. The next overarching concept we used was checks and balances. We really need to understand how our different disciplines in our professional field really work with each other. In philosophy, we tried to understand the theory behind ethics and the theory behind leadership, but that wasn't enough. We really needed the practice of management to understand how the theory was put into place. So philosophy gave us an idea, management helped us put it into place. In psychology and sociology, psychology really allowed us to understand the leader and what the leader was doing, but it didn't take into account the followers. That's where sociology came in and allowed us to understand why the followers followed the leader and what the leader did to enhance the organization. The last integration strategy we used was to create a compound concept. We used leadership and ethics and combined them to come up with ethical leadership. In ethical leadership, the leader really uses, not just makes himself ethical, but he really promotes ethics within the entire organization. Ethics makes the leader stronger as well. And when I had done this literature review, I was pretty satisfied with my work. I thought, this is a great starting point, this is great theory. I really kind of understand what's going on here now. My only problem with it was theory. It wasn't into practice. I didn't understand how this affected anything. So we did our case studies of our 3 leaders. The 3 leaders we looked at were Jack Welch, Jim Jones, and Abraham Lincoln. For those of you who don't know, Jack Welch was the CEO of GE from 1981 to 2000. Jim Jones was a cult leader, and Abraham Lincoln was our president. 3 questions I really wanted to understand with these 3 leaders. 1, were they leaders? 2, were they ethical leaders? And 3, did they create and sustain a strong leader-follower relationship? For all 3, it can be said that yes, they are leaders. They developed goals, and they motivated and inspired people to follow their goals. Were they ethical? Jack Welch was a very ethical business leader. In the research that I've done, a lot of scholars had problems with what he did in order to promote the business. In his first year there, he had to fire 80,000 people. But when you take that in context, the whole world was going through a recession. At that point, it was either take care of a couple people, more than a couple obviously, but take care of everything we can in order to make sure that the company stays afloat. Because in that situation, the company was the most important asset. Jim Jones, extremely unethical cult leader. He got over 900 people to commit suicide, and one of the big things with ethics was, does the person inspire people in a manner that does not affect the dignity of his followers and people outside of his following as well? And Jim Jones obviously did not do that. Abraham Lincoln was extremely ethical within his group. Now, was their relationship sustained over time? Jack Welch, yes. He was able to stay in power as a CEO at GE for 20 years, which is quite a long time for that company. Jim Jones, no. When he died, his ideas left with him. Nobody follows his cult anymore. Nobody follows his ideas anymore. And Lincoln, his leadership can be felt to this day. I just want to conclude, first of all, by thanking you all for coming out and listening. Second of all, I hope you guys leave here today knowing that leadership does not require ethics. You don't have to be ethical to be a leader, but you do need to be ethical in order for your followers to really want to keep your ideals going when you've lost power. Thank you very much. And now I open the floor to any questions. Yes.
Why those 3 leaders? So what were your criteria to pick those leaders to study?
I wanted to study one business leader, one political leader, and one religious leader to kind of get a breadth of knowledge about it. I didn't want to focus on just political, just business, or just religious, because then I'm not quite understanding leadership as a whole. Abraham Lincoln I've always admired, so I wanted to study more into him. I didn't start out with Jack Welch or Jim Jones, but the more I researched into different business leaders and different religious leaders, it became clear that they were both extremely powerful, and I wanted to understand why.
And you wanted some contrast in style?
Yes, I didn't want people who led the same, because then again, I'm not getting the breadth of research within leadership.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
I have a lot of questions, so I'm just going to ask 2.
Okay.
One is, I wonder if what you've learned throughout this process that you think you will carry into your life going forward into some projected leadership role, perhaps. And I also wonder whether what you were studying gave you some additional insight or fodder for thinking about what happened at Penn State.
Actually, Penn State, I looked into that before, when I was really starting this, but as for what I plan to carry away from this, the importance of ethics in everything that I do. I've always strived to be ethical in myself, but looking back on it, I've never really tried to promote ethics within everybody else. I always thought of it more as, if these people are doing what they're supposed to do and I'm being ethical, they'll be ethical as well. That's a part of it, but I also need to teach ethics and teach the importance of it. And with Penn State, I think that was the big downfall. A lot of people have thought Joe Paterno, he did his job. Legally, he did what he had to do. He told his superiors. Legally, he did nothing wrong. Ethically is where the big problem is, and that's why Penn State let him go. Not because he broke any laws, but because he broke his responsibility of ethics towards more than just the university, obviously.
Yes. In a piece of work about ethics and leadership, specifically a piece of work which explicitly asks the question, is it prudent for a leader to behave ethically? I think you must consider Machiavelli.
Yeah,
it's a fairly significant omission, I would say, given that Machiavelli is the father of the school of thought which condones unethical behavior in order to maintain one's hold on power.
You're right. I hadn't even thought about using Machiavelli before, but my final paper is not finished yet. I still have time after this to do it, so that's something I'm definitely going to look into. Machiavelli, thank you very much. Yes.
What are your career goals?
Long term, I'd love to do managerial consulting, more specifically leadership consulting. One of my personal beliefs is that managers can get people to do what they're supposed to do, whereas leaders inspire people to want to do what they're supposed to do, and it's that inspiration which makes people go above and beyond and can make an organization going from following the pace of the market to really setting the pace. So long term, I'd like to do that. In order to get to that goal, I want to start off entry-level management and work my way up.
Well, may you get to that goal. Thank you very much.